And welcome, welcome, welcome to our October book club. It's October 25th, 2022. And I think the last time you'll see Cheryl and I from our Sanctuary North up here in northern Michigan, where the trees are just incredibly stunning still. Edith, you'd be loving this right now, full of color. And every time you turn around, there's more on the ground, more to rake, more to mulch, more to, anyway, it's a wonderful time of year, actually one of our favorites. And we're in the process of taking down all the gardens and getting my mom's house ready to look like she lives in it by herself, which, seems very boring to me. But anyway, enough about us. There we go. Tonight is about Joan. Let me pop this screen up. I know all y'all are here. We have your information. So I'm just going to pop right into this screen. Can you believe this? Look at this, you all. Amazing amount of books you've read, and just always excited to hear your conversation tonight. And I want to show you, though, anybody know what's going on at Sanctuary? Remember we had a pond? Edie, remember we had this little tiny pond? Like it was like this big, right?
Yeah.
We now call it Lake Sanctuary because there are things bigger than my house in the pond. Look at this picture of we took advantage, those of us who are down there and continuing the build out, we took advantage of the dryness. And if you all could even imagine the number of hours we've spent talking about this pond, trying to fix it, trying to help it, trying to do this, trying to do that. So Ken came up with a good idea. He's like, you know what? It's time to literally take the plunge, even though there's nothing to plunge into because there's not a lot of water in the pond. So we did some research and hired some folks. Here you can see this is actually the front end. I'd call it the north end. I'm not sure that's exactly true, but if the part out by the road, this is not a small piece of gear. Just letting you, and you can see he's firmly on terra firma, right? No water there at all, Ken, in the early stages of doing this. And this is a little bit of a later picture. This is actually the sanctuary side. And as they dug out, and I'm talking dug out, they actually moved the dirt. And some of the area looks so pretty now because they cleared all the brush and the scatter, pulled up all those trees and weeds and everything and cleaned everything up. And here you can see, once again, just if you can, all this used to be trees and muck because the gorgeous park we live across the street from, the water comes through, fills our pond, and way down here goes down into a riverbed. And when the park does its fertilization to make all the soccer fields and the baseball fields all wonderful, all that stuff comes down into our pond, which makes the grasses grow in the pond. So now they've cleaned all this out. And this is from the very end. If Mandy were here, Edie, she'd be fishing right around here. Maybe a few steps to the left, right? She'd be down here fishing. And as you can see, again, all this has been gorgeously cleared out. And these banks, Ken, are about 8 feet now, 8 feet deep.
8 to 10.
Can you imagine, folks? Yeah. And this is them. This is the island. This is the farmhouse. And here's Cheryl and I way down here. Once again, them kind of manicuring everything in the early stages. There is water down here. This is our island.
The goal that I gave them and which they accomplished was to increase the volume of water in the pond by a factor of 5 and to increase the surface of the pond by a factor of 5. So we have 5 times the surface and we have 5 times the water, which means I can put 5 times the fish in there.
Yeah. So not that Ken had an ulterior motive, but Ken had an ulterior motive. Okay, so yeah. And now we are praying for rain. That's all we have left to do to finish the project is to pray for, deluge. Here again, you can just see the banks. And as they took all the dirt out, they just pushed it out, made it just beautiful and really cleaned everything up really nicely. Oh, and then that's it. Enough pictures. Just want to give you a little brief of what's going on down there. And here's a nice little calendar to mark your calendar with. It's a little bit of an interesting fall, but tonight we're doing Joan, gonna have a little book club reading. And Bud and Dell, who are hopefully coming on tonight or definitely in a couple weeks, is when we did the Cambodia travelogue, we just realized how much fun those things are. You know, you learn so much, like you were saying, and they're just so interesting to watch and to hear folks share the beauty and the history and what they learned and grew. And Bud and Dell had come onto that with Ken, and they had just gotten back from Alaska. So even though we've been trying to go cruise Alaska for a number of years with Sanctuary at Sea, we're going to first go there with Bud and Dell. And so, Barb, I think you've been contacting them and hooking them up as far as getting their photographs ready.
Yeah, I reached out to Dell.
Good deal. So we're excited about that. And that should be on the books for middle of next month. And then, my friends, please notice, we are about to do CLM in 2022. And so we're going to have a couple information sessions, you know, where you can come in and ask questions and what's it all about? How would I go about that? And so we're excited to put those on the books as well. We've been working in the background, redesigning the entire curriculum for a Zoom media. And then November Book Club is going to be early. It's the week of Thanksgiving in the US, right? So it's going to be the Tuesday of the week of Thanksgiving, okay? The Tuesday before Thanksgiving. So mark that on your calendars, and hopefully tonight you'll decide on a fabulous book. November 29th, for us, it's the biggest day of the year. It is our biggest fundraiser on the planet, and we're excited to kind of leverage Giving Tuesday, information about CLM, and also December 6th, our cookies and cookbook orders. We have put the cookbook in, and the cookbook should be back in time for us to take orders and ship that out for all of your Christmas gifts. Did you hear me? All of them. So you can order how many can at a time? 2, 10, 20, 25, I think you can order at a time. And we'll drive them over to you.
So what do you mean cookies?
Cookie recipes.
Orders. Oh, I thought it was cookie orders. Thought we were going to get to order cookies.
Well, you know, we could also ask Jane Ann to come on that week too. Wouldn't be a bad idea, actually. She only made 22,000 cookies last year, I think. So mark your calendars. Again, we'll get this information out on Facebook and all that, but kind of back to being busy again, not every other week, but sometimes there's a week off and sometimes we'll go full out. Again, putting CLM up in January, the entire 18 session curriculum. So that's what Sanctuary Online will become, CLM Online for the first part of 2023. Questions at all before I hand you over to my gorgeous Jamie Lee Curtis looking spouse?
Yes, I have one question. So we can't order cookbooks until that day?
Kelly, it's all who you know, girlfriend. I'm sure if you text somebody, they'll order you a cookbook. And it's, again, for you, I would expect you to be gifting your entire family with our cookbook. So
Yes.
3, 4, 5, yeah. And I'm sure if you order a whole bunch, there's probably a discount in there somewhere. Who knows? So anyway.
And I'm going to ask them to send me pictures so I can post pictures in the book. No, I'm just kidding. I know you have pictures of that food, Ken.
Oh, goodness. And we do order ahead our first book, right? Our pre-order, right, Barb?
Yeah, we got one pre-order.
If Kelly would like to order, can she email you, Barb? Barb at sanctuaryinthewoods.com?
Sure.
Pre-ordering available now. Okay, Cheryl, there, all yours.
Coordinate with me, Kelly. Just make sure you coordinate with me. We have the same family to some degree. Okay.
Okay. You don't want to give people 2 of them?
Come on.
Honey, I'm going to get a glass of wine. These people are all yours.
Okay.
Enjoy your conversation.
I'll go get a glass of wine too.
Oh, well, welcome. Did everybody read the book? You were able to read most of it? Yep, Kelly?
Most of it. I didn't
Most of
finish.
it? Good, good. All right. And I wondered, because she's such a historical figure, you know, how much y'all knew about Joan of Arc before you read this book?
Nothing.
Nothing?
I knew a little bit. Joan of Arc is actually my confirmation name, St. Joan.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
Yeah. Yeah, I chose her. Yeah. because she was a
I think
warrior.
one of the interesting things about this to me is the Joan of Arc in this book is not the historical Joan of Arc at all.
Really?
In fact,
Oh.
no, Chen even says that in her afterword at the end of the book. She says, I made this woman up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The Joan of Arc in this book doesn't, there's actually a surprising amount of firsthand primary source information about the real historical Joan of Arc. I've read a lot of it. The person in this book doesn't even resemble the real Joan of Arc, which made it fascinating to me because it's set at the same time in the same places, the same other characters, historically and all of that. But from the very beginning, her description of Joan of Arc in this book is just not the historical Joan of Arc at all.
yeah.
You know,
actually.
I was gonna
how-
say, Ken, I'm really glad you said that, because as I was reading through, I was thinking to myself, now that part isn't right, and I'm glad you said that.
So how
Well-
do they, I tried to look up, how do they know about her? Because do they have written stuff from 14 something?
Oh,
Sure.
yes, there's a,
Yeah.
in fact, there probably isn't another woman in the first probably 15 or 16 centuries until the women who are the Christian mystics enter the scene, about whom we have as much information as Joan of Arc, because women just were not important and women were not written about. And
Right.
but Joan of Arc was
They
such
were
an
important.
unbelievable influence, in every aspect of life.
Right.
She
Yeah.
ruled not only the military, but the royal French court and every aspect of French culture. And, she was just so amazingly influential that everybody wrote about her. So there is a ton of primary source information about her.
So what would you suggest? I'd like to read
I
more.
was gonna say, does it make anybody else want to go read it, or did you just start going out and starting looking for things, or?
I
There
did.
are, what you could probably do is, there's so many biographies. This is not a biography, of course, this is historical fiction, but there are so many good biographies about Joan of Arc. If you want to read about the real Joan of Arc, just Google, the most definitive biographies. I'm not familiar with which ones are the most given the most credit right now, but there are a lot of great historical biographies that will tell you, what she was really, really like.
Yeah,
Oh,
And-
thanks. That's good information.
Do you
yeah,
believe?
that is good information. It would be fun to.
Yeah.
uh,
Do you
look.
believe? Oh, I was just gonna ask Ken, do you believe she really heard voices from God?
There are several books written diagnosing what we believe now was probably a mental illness in Joan. She probably was schizophrenic, with auditory hallucinations and delusions of grandeur. I've heard the chair of the Department of Psychiatry at the Harvard School of Medicine, talk about her and say that if he had to diagnose her from what he knows, he would say her schizophrenia was early onset. In real life, she started hearing voices when she was 9 or 10 years old. And they were, she heard them so clearly, they told her what to do and she did it, and then the delusions of grandeur came later in life, when she really did see herself as chosen by God and invincible, as a warrior, and the person that God had chosen to save France
You're the best.
from England. So my guess is that a lot of what we read in medieval times and ancient times, and even the Bible, a lot of what is attributed to demons and miracles and that kind of thing, today we would understand it, as mental illness.
All right,
Well,
thank you.
I was wondering about that too, because that was one of the things that I looked up. I looked up some surprising facts, which I'll share some of them with you, but they won't be surprising to you, Ken. That some doctors and scholars had diagnosed her, like you said, with, you know, all ranging from epilepsy to schizophrenia and all kinds of stuff. And I wondered, having read that or having the historical knowledge, you seem to think, yes, that was probably true. But, or did you start thinking, well, maybe she is hearing that? Maybe, you know, how did you guys feel about it?
I wonder if she was ugly.
Was
She's ugly in our book. I'm just kidding.
So I have something. Am I, yeah, okay. I had something to offer. Cheryl, maybe you remember this. Can you hear me? Am
Yeah.
I? Oh, okay. Did you go to SOS, Cheryl?
Yeah,
Do you remember having to write a paper on a warrior leader? It was one of our assignments.
I don't remember that, but
Yeah, it was one of our assignments. Here's why I remember it.
here's
There
your
were
roadmap.
100 names to choose from. 2 of those names were women's names. One was Major General Jeannie Home, who was the
Right.
first woman to become a general. And the only other woman on the list was Joan of Arc.
Oh my God. Wow.
And I thought, and really, that's the best you could do. And so I said, I'm going to write about Amelia Earhart.
There you
Oh,
go.
And she was not on the list. And they're like, they had no idea what she had done, aside from the fact that she was lost and never found, you know, and she was real trailblazing in a lot of areas. But as far as Joan of Arc, I'm curious to learn more about Joan of Arc, but Joan is the character in the book. And, you know, as Ken pointed out, you know, she says in her afterword, you know, so she is a writer, just said, if there was this person, if there was this woman at this time who would have done this, how would I imagine her? You know, and it is fascinating to think in history how many of the characters in history have had some sort of mental illness. And it's interesting that if the real Joan of Arc was schizophrenic to some extent, that, you know, she had risen to the point that she did. But I really like, and maybe it's just the contemporary nature of the character Joan in the book, you know, this woman warrior that she becomes, not necessarily because she wanted, I mean, it's not a delightful story, you know. I'm wondering, I mean, if you have a childhood where you get beat so often, you just get toughened up and used to it, and you're constantly black and blue. I mean, imagine what we'd call that. I mean, Child Protective Services would be at your door, you know, after week 1 of that stuff. But it was a tough, it was a tough time to live in. You know, that point in time, and after the Battle of Agincourt, and so the point also being that just war sucks. There's no good war, and the victims in war are not always the soldiers. They're often the poor woman who's trying to bring in her wheat harvest and make some bread, you know. And maybe that point that these power figures are the ones responsible for wars, but the real victims are people that have nothing to do with waging the war.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really true. Well, speaking of, you know, of just the whole Ukraine thing, right? You know, yeah. Well, sticking with the book a little bit, how did you feel when the book ended before her trial and before her burning at the stake? Did you feel like that was amiss, or were you surprised?
I was kind of glad it didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. I was expecting it
Yeah.
and not looking forward to it.
Right.
But then when it didn't happen, I was like, oh, good, phew, we don't have to do
Yeah.
that, you know?
Almost as though we all know that.
Yeah,
We don't need to relive it.
They didn't put that in there?
yeah,
I
Yeah.
was surprised by two things. I was a little bit surprised by two things. The first one was, and this is, you know, this is the option of the author as in historical fiction, that 3/4 of the book is about Joan's life before she became Joan of Arc,
sure.
you know, in the way that we know it. In other words, all of that background about her family and all those relationships, I found that really fascinating, because I thought we would just be reading about Joan of Arc, this warrior, you know,
Right.
like most of history presents her. And then I was surprised that we did not hear about the trial and her execution until I realized that she was tried primarily. There were two charges against her. The main one was heresy for claiming that her voices came from God. And since Chen never even mentions in the book that she was motivated all these years by voices that she was hearing from God, she couldn't possibly go on to talk about that as one of the main reasons that she was executed.
Right,
And so then I kind of understood why it just didn't fit in with her Joan, with the Joan she created,
sure.
you know, for this book.
Yeah,
Yeah, and of course there's so much wonderful, really good source material out there about her trial, and exactly what happened in the trial, and then, you know, how she was almost burned, and then they sent her back, and then she put on men's clothes again, and then they took her back out and burned her. You know, there's a lot of really good source material out there about that.
yeah, that was one of the facts that was here, was that it says she wasn't burned at the stake for witchcraft, at least not technically, you know. There were
Yeah.
originally 70 charges ranging from sorcery to horse theft. But they were
Yeah,
whittled down
yeah.
to 12 that were most related to her wearing men's clothing and claims that God had directly contacted her. And so she signed this document confessing and promising to change her ways, right? Although people said they're not even sure she understood what she was signing, because she couldn't
Right.
read, and you know, and she just didn't understand that. But so several days later, and they say possibly due to threats of violence or rape from her guards, Joan put her male attire back on and told the angry judges that the voices had reappeared. And that's when you start thinking, okay, this was something she was hearing or whatever, right? Yeah. But it was those two acts, like you said, Ken, that earned her a conviction and called her a relapsed heretic.
Yeah.
And sent her to the stake. So can you, I mean, that's the whole point. Is it's so interesting to me. It's like, okay, so you heard voices, and then what we would describe as a mental illness, and you're wearing men's clothing, so they're going to burn you at the stake. You know, I mean, this it's amazing, you know, to
You know,
have.
one of the things I thought she did such a great job with in this book, in terms of the historical setting, was how much, and we sometimes tend to forget this because we tend to be familiar with the people who lived during these times, who were geniuses and very rational, all of that, you know, that the world literally was steeped in superstition and magic. You know, it's almost impossible for us to realize today the extent to which magic and superstition ruled the world. Most of it, frankly, fostered by the Roman Catholic Church. But that's what people did that was the first thing that came to their minds, you know, and with us, it's like the last thing, you know, except for these crazies that we got running around here now. But you know, but you know, we moved through the Renaissance and through the Age of Reason and so forth into a very different place where we do not attribute everything, every single little thing that happens to magic and superstition.
Yeah.
It's true.
Well, so I think by the 15th century, 16th century, 15th century, people had become better observers, but did not yet have the explanations. So they were observing these scientific things, but did not have scientific explanations for them, at which point you must turn to superstition or sorcery, because how else do you explain it? And it makes perfect sense, Ken, that the church would be at the root of that, because the church wants to be the explainer. They want to
They want to be
say,
right.
we have the answers. Doesn't matter if the answers are correct, but we're going to give you the answers because we want to be considered the powerful people. And I will say the other thing, the reason I liked Chen's Joan was there might be a few people on this call and a few people on our larger sanctuary community that were girls that grew up liking not girl things. Like, you know, I was going to Detroit public schools in the 70s, and it was a real big deal when we got to wear pants to school, you know? So, you know, that might be part of what makes Joan relatable to those of us, you know, who grew up with that label of tomboy, and then especially to those of us who went into the warrior business in one way or another. So I liked the historical bits, although I really suck at French names and pronunciation. So that always throws me off a little bit. But you know, for in the character Joan in the book, for her dad, you know, it's a girl's marriageability or a girl's, you know, productivity that makes girls valuable, but she made herself valuable in different ways. So
Yeah.
For what
I
it's
thought
worth.
that was one of the, you know, in terms of literary license, that was one of the things that Chen did that really fascinated me, because, you know, there's a museum in France that has 3 garments that Joan actually wore. Actually, there's one garment that was made for Joan when she first went to Shenyang. And then there are 2 patterns for garments that the patterns were used to make garments for Joan. And the conclusion of everybody from these is that Joan was about 5'2" and weighed about 95 pounds. And every primary resource says she was a very small woman. And what did Chen do? She made her this big, strong,
gave her an extra
physically
foot.
imposing. Yes, I thought that was like
6
one of the
feet
most
tall or
interesting
something,
things, changes that she made, you know, in Joan. She even, to me, you know, coming from my background where I studied gender, you know, we look at people and we say, you know, you're either an XX female or you're an XY male. But now we know you can also be an XXY or an XXXY or an XYY. And the way she describes Joan physically, Joan would actually probably be, you know, her biological gender would not be typical. She would probably be an XXY.
Right.
You know, so she would actually have at least one male gender determining chromosome, because you remember when Yolande, Charles's mother-in-law, even talks about her jaw. You know, she talks about, you got a man's jaw.
In the book?
Yeah, in the book.
You know, and so she presents her as people often mistaking her for being male.
Right.
You know, so I thought that was just a wonderful take on how Chen decided to say this is the kind of woman it would take today.
Yeah.
You know, to
Well,
do
I
this.
kept picturing I mean, because she's in the news, poor Brittany Griner.
Oh,
I think I
yeah.
kept picturing a Brittany Griner, but bless her little heart.
Mhm.
But just yeah, a very large person, and I was thinking, I don't think Joan of Arc was big, but
I believed everything in the book because I didn't know anything about her.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. That's what she wanted you to do.
Well, speaking of believing, one of the things that even the author says at the end is that's just not historical, is that while she was commander of the French army, she didn't participate in any of the active war fighting, so to speak, or combat.
Right.
She was like an inspirational mascot. She outlined military strategies,
Yeah.
directed troops, you know, even proposed diplomatic solutions, which, you know, the English didn't buy. She was wounded twice. So
Yes.
in those two
Yes.
precise places where,
That's
where
true.
she talked about, those were true. Those happened, even though she wasn't right there supposedly in the front lines. But the author also says one of the reasons she made her like that was because she didn't totally believe that history, that she was never actively involved in combat. And so I just wondered, having know the history or what you've heard in the history and having read this book, does it make you wonder? Do you think?
well, so define actively involved in combat. I mean,
I
You
mean,
know,
actually swinging a
I'm-
sword and, you know,
yeah,
that.
but if you're close enough to get hit in the neck with an arrow, I would think of that as actively involved. And the other thing, this is slightly tangential, but we really enjoyed the series called The Last Kingdom, which is another historical fiction based on Alfred the Great, who first brought England together. And what comes out in that series, which is actually based on truth, is that his daughter did go into combat armed, but never got historical credit for that, because her husband was supposed to be, so she married into the kingdom of Mercia, and it was a marriage of convenience for nobility, and her husband, King of Mercia, was fairly useless, but because she was Alfred's daughter, she took on the role of warrior leader. And it turns out that that is a real history that just people never heard about, because female warrior leader didn't, that was all an oxymoron, right?
Sure it is, yeah.
So I mean, if to me, even if you didn't swing a sword and actually cut somebody's head off, or take a horse out at the chest and then take out the rider when he hit the ground, if you got injured by a weapon of war a couple of times,
You were in combat, yeah.
maybe, I don't know. I guess it's open to interpretation. But
I'm glad
just
you're
almost
here,
can't
Edie,
imagine
because
that she wasn't involved in it. If that kind of stuff was going on, wouldn't you do something to defend yourself, or something to, they did say, the author did say she did historically, she pulled that arrow out of her neck, so.
and you later, I'm glad you're here, Edie, because I was hoping you'd be here, because I wanted to ask you that very question about, how close to combat would she have? Because the historical take on Joan is that she did not kill people in battle. She did not ride in and slay the enemy and kill them and all of that. That she was a brilliant military strategist,
Right.
and that she was an icon. She rode in on that white silver armor with banners, and that was the inspiration for all of those troops who were out there, you know, chopping each other into pieces, but that she was never in the fray. But then you have to ask yourself, well, how close to the fray do you have to be to get an arrow in the neck and a crossbow bolt in the leg? You know, which almost killed her. That
Yeah.
crossbow thing, you know, remember, it crippled her and almost killed her.
Well, I'm sitting in a room with a woman who got sent to Iraq and put behind a machine gun and got shot at. And you know, I have other women who are friends that went to Iraq and Afghanistan and got shot at and may or may not have been in a position to shoot back.
Mhm.
So, you know, if you didn't get shot at with a machine gun in 1422 or 1429, but you got shot at, I'd say that's combat. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and Barb and Kay both had some comments in here about Barb saying the Norse cultures was pretty common for women to fight beside men. One skeleton that's archaeologically says that all indications say it's female, but it's buried with an assortment of weapons, and many male archaeologists resist the idea that the skeleton is a woman, you know. And then Kay, you're saying, of course, this is, you know, this is the way it is true with the Bible and a lot of other things. Women aren't writing the stories
right.
of England and France wars, right?
That's right.
They aren't. So,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
there you have it.
That,
But
that's why it takes a woman, I think, at the end of this book to say, I know what all of history says, that Joan was not really a warrior, but I don't know about that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it took a woman, you know, to say that, to challenge all of that primary source history.
Yeah, it's hard for me to believe that, you know, if she was that smack in the middle of it and directing where the, you know, you guys go here and you guys go here and this and that and all this, that she wasn't somehow, you know, as a leader.
I
leading
think the
to
other
some
thing,
degree.
I think the other thing is, you know, one of the things we know is that it was not unusual, you know, for kings, you know, to go right
Right.
into battle,
Right,
but they were surrounded by
Yes.
people protecting them,
yes,
which movies don't always show. You know, those people were never left out there by themselves,
right,
you know, just for anybody to kill who wanted to kill them. You know, and Joan was so revered. She was such at that point, people literally believed that she was an angel.
yeah,
You know, that there was a divine quality to her. And there's no way they would have let this little woman ride right into the middle of the battle. You know, she probably may have been right in the middle of it, but if she was surrounded,
sure,
you know, by people who were there to protect her.
yeah.
Jen, or anybody would really just, I wonder too, how much the Catholic Church has a vested interest in portraying women as, you know, possessing the more womanly stereotypes of, you know, being above the actual physical action. It's not ladylike to go out and hit somebody with a sword. So is there a bit of vested interest in in enforcing a stereotype of a woman, you know, who has the smarts to be a warrior, but refrains from getting her hands dirty?
Yeah, sure. That's the what historically is known as the Madonna whore syndrome, that women are divided into either Madonnas, virgins, or whores. There's nothing between the virgin and the whore historically, in the way in which the Catholic Church early on particularly presented women. And so you read even the emphasis in this book on her being a virgin.
Yes,
You know, there was, for example, and this is historically correct, and it's in the book, that there was a woman who was known as a prophetess in Avignon. And when Joan was just about 10 years old, this woman in Avignon predicted that a virgin woman warrior would rise and save France. And so they were looking for her. They were literally looking for her. And then there were other people out there predicting, no, it's going to be a young boy. You know, and so remember when they first went to Chignon, they were bringing these children in and testing them,
Yeah.
you know, to see which one of you is going to fulfill the prophecy,
Right.
you know, and finally they settled on Joan. So yes, very much, Barb, they had very much a vested interest in the fact that God chose Joan because Joan was a virgin. And then later, when Joan started losing importance, what did they call her?
A whore. Yeah.
Whore.
Yeah.
Exactly. It
Absolutely.
went from Madonna to
Yep.
whore.
Yep. Yep. And another thing Kay said, and of course, this Dauphin, who was the king, never was in the battles. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
He was a very weak man. Yeah.
Yes.
That was Charles VII.
I wanted to, I had a thought, it was maybe a strange kind of thing, but I was telling Jovi about it, you know, Joan of Arc was driven, you know, by in whatever, she was driven. And if you were to believe anything about what the author says about her relationship with her father, whether, you know, believe it or not, that he was at least partially responsible. He drove her, he did things that caused her to move in that direction. I mean, you remember when we read Matthew McConaughey in Greenlights, it was the same kind of thing. His dad was this, and Matthew's kind of driven, you know? And I just wondered if you all felt like there was a connection between, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody beating up on you, but a father figure or a mother figure or somebody that just kind of drives that into you, or something happening to you that causes you to be driven or like that. Is that a correlation for you guys, or am I just totally off base? I mean, I think of Oprah Winfrey, you know,
But I guess my question would be, we would call that person really a victim of abuse, emotional or physical abuse. And for everyone that takes it as a challenge and drives themselves from it, how many just fall by the wayside and give up and start and believe, you know, when he says, you know, we miss Katherine, nobody will miss you, the father does. So I think my feeling would be that would be the exception rather than the rule, to be driven by that kind of abuse rather than subdued by it.
maybe you
actually
just don't
felt
hear
like
about
that
the
was,
ones that are subdued, you know?
you
Go
know,
ahead.
I thought that was the one weak point in the book, a weak thing to the whole book, which was, we know historically, if we can believe history, that Joan's motivation, you have to ask yourself, what kept this woman going, for God's sake? You know, and in the book, it was the voices. It was the voices from God that kept her going. And all the way through this book, I kept thinking, this author, by creating a totally different Joan and not mentioning the voices, is not telling me what kept her going like that. You know, she herself in the book says that it was two things. She says it was the abuse from her father and her love for Katherine, her sister. You know, she keeps saying, I'm doing this for Katherine. You know, but somehow to me, I was never convinced, you know, that what Joan did and went through and all of that, you know, was motivated by those two things, or at least that the author just didn't quite sell us, you know, on that. When you remove Joan's voices, you really have to ask yourself, then why did she do all of this?
You know, Ken, I didn't specifically, I can't remember specific voices, but it seemed like in the book, she did have a very complicated relationship with God where she was demanding of God or insisting and expecting that was who she was, really, you know?
Yeah. There's no question that she was a 15th century Catholic. And she talked to God and she asked God for specific things and that kind of thing. But the historical Joan supposedly heard voices that not only gave her the plans for military action, but told her that she was put on the earth to save France from England and to be sure that Charles VII became the legitimate king of France. And that's just not in the book.
Yeah.
The impression that she thought God was very involved in it because she asked him for super powerful strength. And I was puzzled that after she got the strength, she didn't think back to that moment. It seems strange to me. Did anybody else notice that? That like she asked God for when her sister died, I think, to the power to subdue her dad or whatever. She wanted to get everybody. And that's where that list came from, right? She said all of a sudden someone was off the list, Dupu or something.
Historically, Joan supposedly after her military victories, which were really numerous and amazing and miraculous, then she insisted on that attack on Paris. When both the English and the Burgundians had allied in Paris, and that's when she suffered her first really humiliating defeat, and also suffered that horrible wound, in her leg. And then a year or a few months later, she got an opportunity to lead a 300 men into another place and failed again. Historically, they say that at that time Joan crumbled physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. She just kind of became a different person because she did not understand why God had abandoned her. That she had depended on all of this specific information from God, and it had always proven true. And here all of a sudden, she's not hearing her voices. There's a wonderful there are several movies made about Joan of Arc, and one of them is one of the oldest ones that I've been trying to remember. Can anybody remember who played Joan of Arc in that probably 1925 or 30 movie?
I'm thinking of something later, still black and white, but later.
It was still black and white. Yeah, for sure. It may have been later, maybe in the 30s.
Okay.
Yeah. But I remember in that movie, her desperation when the voices stopped, and she felt like, I have been God's chosen up until now, but now I'm not, that horrible feeling of being abandoned by God.
Yeah, I watched the 1999 movie before our book club, and that was in that movie. But I do remember seeing a listing. There's 1948. No, there's
Who played her in 48?
oh, there's 1929, The Passion of Joan of Arc. No dialogue, it says.
Who's the woman who played her? Is it
In 48 or in 1929?
29?
Oh, okay. Let's see if I can find out. It doesn't say it.
I think that's the one I was thinking about because it was a silent movie, and you remember how they overacted.
Oh yeah, in the silent movies they really.
I remember
gestures.
I remember when she realized or concluded that God had abandoned her and wouldn't talk back to her. The way the way that woman who was playing Joan, portrayed that, I just remember how overly dramatic it was.
Maria Falconetti.
Yeah, I see a poster of that movie. Does this look
Okay.
like what it is?
That's it.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yes,
that's
that's the one. Yeah.
The 48 version is the one I remember watching as a kid, but I can't remember who played Joan. I mean, I can almost see her face. I just don't know my classical actors from that time. I don't know. Kelly, do you see it? Can you see that one?
Ingrid Bergman.
Oh,
Ingrid
yes,
Bergman.
yes, Bergman.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Ingrid, okay, my
and
brain
who
was saying
played-
Ingrid Bergman, but I was like, I don't think that's right.
And who played Joan in the 99 version? It was a young French actress.
I
Very
see that
young.
one. Let's see. I can't see her name. It's that one, right?
Okay.
Let me see what it says.
Because remember, Joan was 19 when she was burned.
Yeah,
She was 14 when she first went to Shenyang,
yeah.
and she was
That's
17
incredible. Yeah.
when she led the French army in the Battle of Orleans.
Well, 20 to
This was a
25 was probably
teenager,
20 to 25 was probably middle age in the 15th century.
middle aged by then. Yes, that's true. Yep. Interesting to know what life expectancy was for women then.
That's why
I
they
know
were
the
checking
burning
to
of
see
the-
she was a virgin at age 10, right?
Burning of the stake is just horrible, but I was reading about it. And they said if the executioner was somewhat compassionate, they would make the fire with green wood mixed with,
Yes.
burnable. So the victim would
Smoke.
die of smoke inhalation or get
Yeah.
unconscious from the smoke
Yeah.
before the flames came. It's still,
And
it still makes me
still
cringe.
horrible.
I know.
Also, the other thing that some of the executioners would do is that they had a narcotic concoction that they would give to the victim to drink, and they would kind of just pass out. Or
Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
yeah,
Here's a movie from 1962 called The Trial of Joan of Arc. That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
This
Speaking
is
of,
like the 5 best movies about Joan of Arc.
oh, well, when they talk about the trials, one of the historical facts I read was that she had a really volatile temper, right? And that during the court hearings, when a clergy with a thick regional accent asked what language her voices spoke, she retorted that they spoke French far better than he did. And, what's an example of her temper in the book? What did you guys feel like? Yeah, you could really.
When she went against her dad.
Yeah, later in the book, I remember her going up against, here's where I'm failing on the French names, La Marine or Marin or
The Maroon.
Macon,
he was one of the military officers.
yeah, La Macon, yeah.
Yeah, he had intimidated her, and then he said something, and she just got all up in his grill. Yeah. And that
What
is,
got
I
me
mean,
was in that last battle, she just seemed controlled by rage. She just, it was like she wasn't in control anymore. She was just
I think
raging.
one of the themes of this book that we really shouldn't miss, and it feels to me with Shen doing what she was trying to do by creating a Joan for today, was to say, this is the damage that can be done to women when men decide to make them something that they are not, try to force them and keep them to be something that they are not. it's just, Joan was, whatever happened to Joan was not a nice person by the time she died. Even the people who had loved her, didn't like her, by the time she died. And it was clearly not her fault. The expectations that were placed on the Madonna, the pure woman, those expectations drove Joan to an estimation of herself, which was so unrealistic that she ended up hating herself because she couldn't fulfill the expectations of these men.
Right.
It's
Well,
just
so that hasn't changed in 600 years.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's probably your point, Ken, is that she was creating a Joan for today and giving helping us to realize that, right? Yeah. Well, I mean, I have one little quip here from her historical facts here is that Joan inspired the ever popular bob haircut, which originated in Paris in 1909. And I mean, did anybody know that she was the inspiration for this haircut?
I did not know that.
I thought that was hilarious.
I'd have just thought that dealing with long hair was the inspiration for short hair.
Oh. You're on the battlefield anyway, right?
That's good.
Anyway, I thought that was a cute.
That's awesome.
cute little quip.
Yeah, but
Be a witness.
There it's Ken.
I guess the bottom line is I do like the Joan that Chen created, the Joan that as a kid was fascinated with the weapons and the blacksmith and the chainmail and how odd that was for a little girl, and that she, whether it was through abuse or determination, she was a strong character that you could, if you're a woman, you could want to be.
Yeah, you can relate to her perfectly. A she-ro, right?
Yes, she wrote.
As she wrote, it did take me to confess, I did kind of have to stick with the first few chapters. I was kind of like, but it picked up and it really grabbed me at a certain point.
Yeah.
And I thought Chen did a really good job as a writer, and I'm assuming her history, Ken would know this, I guess, but I'm assuming her history was fairly accurate, her historical tidbits, characters.
Her historical research, I mean, is amazing. It really is. Just the detail, is really quite something. And I read a couple of reviews of the book before I read the book, and every reviewer complimented her. In fact, one reviewer said, if you look up historical fiction in the dictionary, you should see a picture of her. Because she's so good, at all of that detail. And so y'all remember we talked about gender a while back. We talked about 3 aspects of gender: biological gender, gender role, and gender identity. And to me, the fascinating thing about this book is that Chen, first of all, plays with her biological gender. She suggests to us that she may not have just been an XX female.
Right.
And then her gender role, she literally just blows it out of the water, to say this female does not act feminine. She acts masculine, and so that's what just reminded me of that when you said that, Edie. Here is a totally atypical female in the 15th century refusing to do what women do because she'd prefer to do what men do.
Exactly.
And insisting on her right, to do that. And then the gender identity, I never felt in this book that Chen was trying to tell us that Joan was trans. I never felt like she was trying to tell us that Joan felt like she was male. I think what she does, though, is tell us that Joan felt like in order to fulfill her gender role, she had to act male, that's the only way she could do that. So she plays with all three of those aspects of gender just brilliantly, I think.
Right. And she still does the nurturing thing, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, that aspect of it is still
We're gonna do the
brings
book
out the
proposal.
typical female role, if you will. Yeah. All right. Excellent book. That was fun, right?
Mhm.
And I know I enjoyed going and finding some stuff that was real about her, and you know, just fun stuff even. But now the question becomes our last book of the year, because we're not doing one in December. What shall we read?
Well, you sent an email saying the book Woman of Troublesome Creek.
Yeah.
That's been on my list to read. You had sent that email, I think, Cheryl. Somebody had suggested that. I thought that was a good suggestion.
Okay, that was one that Bud suggested.
Which one is that? Let me write that out.
The book Woman of Troublesome Creek. It's about a librarian who delivers books on horseback. It's a historical fiction.
Oh, cool. He just sent in another one.
Oh,
Actually, let me show you this because he is,
The Sweetness of Water.
yeah,
by
but he could
Nathan
use some
Harris.
prayers for tomorrow. Let me unblur myself. Getting stitches out tomorrow.
oh,
Oh,
good.
he's getting stitches out tomorrow. He had his eyes.
Yeah, his lids
lids,
down or something, but he's
yeah, raised and lowered, I think.
he's looking very sad, which is why he's not here tonight.
Oh,
Hmm.
But he's
He
looking
probably
forward to
didn't
getting.
want you to show that.
Pardon?
That's why he's not here.
Oh,
Oh,
we've been chatting, but he said
It looked like hell, but he's
he
getting
sent the
so he's not.
Sweetness of Water
He's
by Nathan Harris. So I pulled that up, of
Uh.
course. And that was a if you care, Obama's book of the year in 2021.
Mhm.
oh,
Winner of Award for Literary Excellence, Writers League of Texas Book Award Fiction, just award, Carnegie Medal for Excellence, Best Book of the Year by Oprah Daily, NPR, Washington Post, Time, Boston Globe, Smithsonian, Chicago Public Library.
What's it about?
wow.
Any information?
Yeah,
Civil
it's
War.
about, it says in the spirit of the known world and the Underground Railroad, blah, 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 the unlikely bond between two freedmen who are brothers and the Georgia farmer whose alliance will alter their lives and his. So it's set in the end of the Civil War where these two brothers are freed and they go to this farm and begin to work the farm for the white folk who've lost a son in the war, and they hire the brothers. So in the middle of this, parallel to this story, runs a forbidden romance between two Confederate soldiers. The young men recently returned from the war to the town of Old Ox, hold their trysts in the woods. But when the secret is discovered, there's chaos, murder, and convulsive repercussions to the entire community. And then Isabel, who is the wife of the farmer, emerges as the unlikely leader, proffering a healing vision for the land and the newly free citizens of Old Ox. So it says, candor and sympathy, unforgettable cast of characters, depicting Georgia in the violent crucible of Reconstruction, equal parts beauty and terror, as gripping as it is moving. The Sweetness of Water is an epic whose grandeur locates humanity and love amid the most harrowing circumstances. Whew, and he sent it to us in all caps. So if you want
Sounds hard to
Bookwoman,
beat.
so Carol and Rose gave us the background on the book, the Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek. And were you doing something else with Lincoln, Cheryl?
Yeah, there was another one that Bud had recommended last month called
The Lincoln Highway?
Highway.
Oh, yeah.
Which Kay, you said that was kind of like that one book that we read where the people, they gathered together, they took a trip together somewhere.
That we read,
Carol, have you read that one? Or Kay, have you read that one?
not the Lincoln Highway, no.
Yeah, Cheryl, it's kind of hard to hear you. You seem like you're back from your mic.
Oh,
This is again, New York Times bestseller, 1 million copies sold, a Today Show read with the Jenna Book Club, chosen again by Oprah, Time, NPR, Washington Post, and Barack Obama as the best book of the year in 2021. Do you want me to read about it?
Yes. No one else will answer.
In June of 1954, 18-year-old Emmett Watson is driven home to Nebraska by the warden of the juvenile work farm where he had just served 15 months for involuntary manslaughter. His mother long gone, his father recently deceased, and the family farm foreclosed on. Emmett's intention is to pick up his 8-year-old brother Billy and head to California where they can start their lives anew. When the warden drives away, Emmett discovers that 2 friends from the work farm have hidden themselves in the trunk of the warden's car, and together they have hatched an altogether different plan for Emmett's future, one that will all take them all on a fateful journey in the opposite direction to the city of New York. Spanning just 10 days and told from multiple points of view, this would kind of be cool. Towell's third novel will satisfy fans of his multi-layered literary styling while providing them an array of new and richly imagined settings, characters, and themes. So they all 3 sound great. Y'all are in trouble.
I had 2 I was gonna mention, but I'm not even gonna bother at this juncture.
Well,
What are your thoughts, friends?
I like all 3 of them.
Thank you, Kelly. That's helpful.
The sweetness of water sounds interesting. I am
So-
fascinated by that historical, the women that, that served as librarians to the Appalachians and whatnot. But I don't know, I'm also just kind of a history nerd enough to be interested in the Civil War, the one set in the Civil War, or
Sweetness
post
of Water.
end of
Yeah.
the Civil War.
has Bud changed his mind? He's going with The Sweetness of Water rather than The Book Woman of Troublesome Creek. Is that what you're getting, Joby?
Yes.
No, let me ask him. I'm gonna tell him you've caused trouble now, friend.
It's his fault. He's causing a controversy.
Okay, what's your opinion?
They all sound good.
Yeah,
They all sound good. I think the Book Woman of Troublesome Creek is of course it's nowhere near the same thing, but it's more like the book we just read than The Sweetness of Water. It's going to take us to it's not about a woman who is a hero
Oh,
kind
I
of
see what you mean.
in the
Yeah.
same way.
I see
Um,
what you mean.
So for a little variety, you're saying, Ken?
I think I'd go with The Sweetness of Water.
I think I like the idea of the parallel storylines too. I mean, just
yeah,
that sounds
That's
fun
true,
for a little
too.
bit different.
I like that too, yeah.
that's my.
I haven't read anything
Well,
with any romance in it for a while.
Okay, you're being discussed at the book club because you're causing trouble.
No, we kind of decided he's.
No, he's not causing trouble. He made a good recommendation.
Are you still there, my friend?
Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Okay, so there's trouble in River City Book Club here. So,
Paradise.
well, because someone earlier, I don't know what this guy's name is, I think Bud, suggested a book called The Book Woman of Troublesome Creek.
Yeah.
And so some of us have been looking forward to that as a great read. And then
Okay.
somebody comes in at the last minute with this all caps, highly suggested, the sweetness of water. Yeah. Yeah. And then there was always, the
Lincoln Highway.
the, what's this other one? The Lincoln Highway that I think you may have also weighed in on.
God,
Oh my
awesome.
God, you would call it like a shit server.
Rejected. Great.
I don't know, but they're not here to defend themselves. And I think they're landing. Are y'all landing on Sweetness of Water?
I think so.
Think so.
Okay, we think they're landing on Sweetness of Water as they were fighting as I was trying to get your number and call you. And they were, you know, I think they did rock, paper, scissors, a 7-way competition. It was really hard to watch.
The
And then
bottom
the
line
end-
is we can't lose. We
Yeah, at
can't
the very
lose.
end, Kay did paper over Ken's rock and the whole thing was over. So,
Too fun.
all
We'll
right.
go with the Sweetness of Water.
3 of them, but gosh, Sweetness of Water. He's a local guy, and it's. his
Oh, it's a
first book.
local, yeah, it's a local author too, local to Austin
Oh,
folks.
good.
So,
Oh,
okay.
cool.
And then we're gonna just wrap your little surgery in prayers tomorrow. Okay,
Okay, well, no, I had surgery. I just get
good, good.
everything out tomorrow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's pain-free. Just kidding, I lied. Okay, so,
Thank you.
all right, you be well. And I want you to know because next month, we're gonna have book club a bit early.
Okay.
It's the Tuesday of Thanksgiving week, so we want you to make sure you get it done by then, okay? And show up with your cute new eyes. Okay,
We'll do it. Okay.
all right, we love you.
Love you too. Thanks. for
Love
calling.
you. Sending
Bye,
love.
love you.
Bye.
And we should, and Ken, you have surgery Thursday, so please.
Yes,
let
the
Ken-
day after tomorrow, I'm having some spinal surgery on my
Oh.
spine. And so I would really appreciate your prayers and healing energy and you know, so forth. This was scheduled for July, and then they had to postpone it. And because first of all, in leading up to that surgery, they discovered I was diabetic and my A1C was way too high to do it. So they gave me 3 months to get my A1C down, and I got it down from 8.7 to 4.7. And so they're all terribly impressed with me now.
Can't remember what else.
And so they've rescheduled the surgery. So I'm having surgery on my spine on Thursday. And I'm just so excited to get this done because it's just been a horrible experience of having to wait almost 4 months, to get
And
this
the
done. So
pain,
yeah, it's painful and it's weakness and just all kinds of symptomology. Some of you probably know some about this, but anyway, it's going to happen day after tomorrow, and I'm just so excited and
Yes.
a little bit frightened because you know at my age, anything having to
Yes.
do with your spine
For you.
is kind
Good,
of
this is
risky
Yeah.
so but I'm just
Will,
very
can I-
very
Can I
excited to
finish book
getting
club and
this
call
done.
you right
Yeah.
back?
We'll
Yeah.
be sending you lots of healing and love.
yes.
Thank you so much.
They're just-
Thank you
yeah,
so
no,
much.
You know.
Ken, do you know what
you
time
right
yet?
back.
Or will they tell
Not
you
yet.
today?
I won't find out the time until tomorrow.
Right, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
let us know, okay?
Okay, I will.
All right.
Okay, what are,
There's our
Yeah.
Ellen.
Prayers for Ellen too. There's our
That's
Ellen.
right.
Our good friend Ellen with her first photo with 1 1/4 legs. So
Not
she's
even a
doing-
quarter.
Yeah, she's doing,
Yeah.
I think, fabulously well, folks would say, and she would probably say that. But again, just keep her in your
for
prayers.
sure.
And
Yeah.
she's kicking this thing as hard as it's kicking her. She's kicking right back.
Her
Absolutely.
superpowers are courage and faith.
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah, love it. So
Definitely.
go on to her Facebook page and give her some love. It's Ellen Hurst is her last name. And just give her some love and some encouragement. You know, she's got a good long road, but a great attitude and a great support system as well. So. All right, my friends, it is 9:18. You're making a whole brand new record. How long
Okay.
did book club go?
all right.
Love you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This has been
Thank you.
great.
It's been great.